Go ahead, caller.
Hi, my daughter's gone missing.
How old's your daughter, love?
She's 4.
The beginning of a nightmare. This call just moments after Ellie Smith's world stopped. Her daughter, Cleo, gone, snatched as her family slept at the remote Blowholes campground in...
Welcome back. I'm Cassie and this is A Wicked World. YouTube has really been suppressing true crime in their algorithm lately. So if you could give this video a like or subscribe now to the channel if you're not already, it would help out a lot and is greatly appreciated. So the story I have for you today is a highly unusual one. Not only was this little girl taken from right underneath her parents' noses, but it also had a very unexpected ending. This is the story of Cleo Smith. At the time Cleo Smith was 4 years old in 2021, she was a happy and healthy little girl who had just recently become a big sister. Some of her favorite things to do were collect rocks, dress up, and put makeup on. Her mother called her her little princess, and Cleo was said to be a funny little girl with the biggest heart. Cleo's mother, Ellie Smith, had actually begun dating a man named Jake Glidden when Cleo was only 1 year old, and shortly after, they got married. So even though Jake was only Cleo's stepdad, he thought of her as his own, and he really just adored the little girl. On the evening of Friday, October 15, 2021, Ellie Smith and Jake Glidden took their daughters, 4-year-old Cleo and 7-month-old Isla, on a camping trip. Camping was one of the family's favorite pastimes, and it was their first time going since Isla had been born. Cleo's parents, Ellie and Jake, had both grown up in Carnarvon and had spent many of their childhood holidays with family at a nearby coastal campsite known as Blowholes, which was only a little under an hour's drive away from where they lived. Now, having a family of their own, the young parents were excited to carry on their tradition, and they even bought a new tent for the occasion. The family arrived at their campsite around 6 p.m. They then began to set up their tent as the sun set. All four had dinner together shortly thereafter, and then the girls were tucked into bed. And a little while later, Ellie and Jake also retired to the tent for the night. Around 1:30 in the morning, Cleo woke up her parents, asking for some water. Ellie tended to her, and then everyone went back to sleep. A few hours after that, around 6 a.m., Isla stirred, and Ellie knew that she wanted to be fed. So she opened up the internal divider in the tent between where she had been sleeping and where her daughters had been sleeping. When she did, she saw that Isla was on her cot. However, Cleo was gone. Her sleeping bag was missing, and the zippered opening to the tent had been left wide open. Ellie then called 000 to report her daughter as missing. Fellow campers quickly began to help in the search for the little girl, and shortly after, police arrived. When they did, authorities set up roadblocks outside of the campground, stopping campers on their way out and taking down their information. Cars were also searched.
Just there.
Yep.
We woke up this morning and she was missing.
Yep.
Volunteers, police, family and friends, and other Carnarvon locals joined in the search. Additionally, the ocean was scoured and a local helicopter company joined in looking for Cleo. Efforts continued throughout the day and night. However, there was no sign of 4-year-old Cleo. Police wondered if maybe the toddler had just wandered off, but after a second day of still no results, they began to think that she likely had been kidnapped. Terrifying the girl's parents even further was police's announcement that 20 sex offenders lived near the campsite where Cleo had last been seen. Missing person posters with Cleo's picture and description were put up in almost every business in Carnarvon, and nearly the entire community was searching for her at this point. On the 4th day of police's search for the missing girl, they looked inside all of the holiday cabins that were scattered throughout the Blowholes camping area, even breaking open locks if necessary. Additionally, DNA samples were collected from the campers who had been there over the weekend while Cleo was there. The campsite itself was closed and remained a crime scene for weeks. Throughout the entire search for Cleo, her parents had remained at the campsite as well, hoping against all odds that their daughter would be found nearby. Her mother said in a television interview, "I guess the worst part is we can't do anything more. It's out of our hands. We just feel so hopeless and out of control. Everyone asks us, what do we need? Really, all we need is our little girl home." Every time Ellie and Jake would receive a phone call, they got excited, thinking that maybe their daughter had been found. But unfortunately, their hopes kept getting shattered. Cleo's friend Naya even made a heartbreaking statement, saying about her friend Cleo, "She needs to come home because she needs to be with her family." Naya even drew a picture of her friend, saying if anyone recognizes her, to please bring her back home. By this point, social media was also flooded with theories about what happened to Cleo, many of them being unfounded. And a lot of people were starting to blame her parents for her disappearance. Police, however, stressed that Cleo's parents were not in any way suspects and they were fully cooperating. Detectives soon after would publicly announce that the biggest reason they feared foul play in Cleo's disappearance was because the tent she had been sleeping in had been unzippered to a height that the little girl would have been unable to reach. By the 6th day of Cleo being missing, a $1 million reward was being offered for anyone who had any information as to where she had gone. Police would also reveal their first major lead in the case. There had been multiple members of the public who reported seeing a vehicle turning off Blow Hills Road around 3 in the morning on the day that Cleo disappeared. But they asked for the driver of the vehicle to come forward with no success. And police reviewed hundreds of hours of CCTV footage, but were unable to find the car or who was behind the wheel. And by this time, there had been more than 200 reported sightings of Cleo all around Australia, but none proved to be reliable. The search continued for the mysterious driver who had been seen on Blowholes Road, and police continued to canvass Carnarvon, going business to business, requesting any CCTV footage that they may have. And 2 weeks into their investigation, police said that they had many leads, however, no suspects. Then, on November 3rd, shortly after 1 a.m., an entire 18 days since Cleo had gone missing, her mother Ellie received a phone call. It was the police, and they told her they had someone that wanted to speak with her. They then placed Cleo on the phone. The 4-year-old had been found, alive and unharmed. Police had just rescued her from the house of a man named Terrence Kelly. His house was also located in Carnarvon, and just minutes away from where Cleo lived with her family. The little girl's family was overcome with joy, and when the police made the announcement to the public that she had been found, the residents of Carnarvon erupted with glee and began celebrating. They quickly plastered the town with pink and purple balloons and a banner that read, "Welcome home, Cleo." Many people had never thought that Cleo would be found alive after she had been missing for 18 days. Upon receiving the phone call from police, Cleo's family immediately got in the car and went right down to the hospital to be with their beloved daughter. Cleo's mother, Ellie, later posted to social media saying that her family was whole again. So 4-year-old Cleo had been found shortly after midnight on November 3rd, 2021, in a home filled with dolls. Terrence was apparently obsessed with dolls, and he would often post photos on social media boasting about his love for girls' toys. And when she was found, she was actually inside a dark, locked room, playing with a toy car. The moment detectives found her, you can hear her on a recording telling them that her name is Cleo.
I've got you, Bobby. What's your name? You're alright. What's your name? What's your name, sweetheart?
My name is Cleo.
Cleo, my name's Cameron. How are you? Are you okay? We're going to take you to see your mummy and daddy, okay? Is that good?
You were there when Cleo was found. How was your emotion?
Well, shock to start with, quickly followed by elation, obviously. And, I was just, it could have been any one of the team that were here. It just turned out that I was one of, 4 guys that were fortunate enough to go through that door and make that rescue. But we'd always hoped for that outcome, but still we're not prepared for it. So, yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. And originally it was, to see her sitting there and in the way that she was, it was just incredible.
What did she say to you, Kev? What did she say to you?
Well, I asked her what her name was. One of the guys jumped in front of me and picked her up, and I just wanted to be absolutely sure that it certainly looked like Cleo. I wanted to be absolutely sure it was her, so I said, "What's your name?" And she didn't answer, and I said, "What's your name?" She didn't answer again, so I asked her a third time, and then she looked at me and she said, "My name's Cleo," and it was, and that was it. So then we turned around and walked out of that house, and not long after that, got into the car, and the officer I was with, Detective Sergeant Hutchinson, who was the family liaison officer, called Cleo's parents and said, "We've got someone here that wants to speak to you." And it was, you know, a wonderful feeling to be able to make that call. So,
What was their reaction?
oh, you can imagine, just absolute surprise, and they were ecstatic. So things developed so quickly. You know, we didn't really have time to prepare them, and certainly didn't want to give them any false expectations about what might happen. We didn't know ourselves, so you know, it's always a delicate process, you know, when it comes to that. So, you know, still to be able to give them that news and then say, you know, please start making your way to the hospital, we'll meet you there, was fantastic. And can I say, having seen her a couple of times this morning, she's a little Energizer bunny, and she, you know, how she has that much energy, I wish I did. I'm about ready to go to sleep, but she was, yeah, so just a very, very sweet, energetic girl, very, very trusting and very open with us. You know, we all wanted to take turns in holding her. So yeah, it was yeah, a really good experience. Was she physically okay? She's physically okay. Yeah, and that was evident from the start. And you know, taking to the hospital, I guess, was, you know, assurance of that from the people that know what they're doing.
We've spoken about Cleo's parents' reaction to hearing the news, but what was Cleo's reaction to seeing her parents for the first time?
Oh, you know, mummy, big hugs, kisses, yeah, and lots of tears. You know, so as you can expect, you know, it was.
Is this the best moment of your career?
Oh, without a doubt.
Prior to finding Cleo, police had actually pulled Terrence over for reckless driving just miles away from his home, where Cleo was being held. He was then arrested and charged with forcibly taking a child under the age of 16. While the 4-year-old had been held in Terrence's home, he locked her in a room with a mattress on the floor and would turn on the radio really loud to drown out her cries for her mother. At one point, Cleo even heard her name on the radio, and she began to cry for her parents. This, however, only prompted Terrence to turn up the radio even louder.
Obviously, it hurts to know that she was crying out for help and we weren't there. It hurts to know that she was crying out for help and
it was ignored, yeah.
It was ignored.
He had also left little Cleo in the home all alone for hours while he went to meetings, shopping, and visited with his relatives. Also during his interrogation, Terrence told police that he had tried to restrain Cleo's hands, feet, and mouth with sticky tape, and also tried to tie her to a chair. But he said his attempts failed because she was a bit of a fighter. However, he also told the investigators that he did not want to badly hurt her at all. Police spent multiple days combing through the home where Cleo had been found. They seized a mobile phone, Bratz dolls, crayons, and other items. And unbelievably, on social media, days before Cleo had been found, Terrence had actually friended her mother, Ellie. And little did she know that this was the man that had taken her daughter. When Terrence Kelly had gone to the remote Western Australian Blowholes campsite that night, he had only been looking to steal some money and purses, but ended up leaving with a child instead. Terrence's crime had also been emboldened by methamphetamine that he had consumed prior to taking Cleo. He had unzipped the family tent sometime between 2:40 and 4:40 a.m. He had then scooped Cleo out of her tent, sleeping bag and all, and vanished into the night. The reason that Terrence told police he had actually taken Cleo was because he wanted a little girl to play with and dress up. He also said that he had not planned on keeping the girl, but it's unclear exactly what his plan was.
Her kidnapper, the doll-obsessed loner, Terrence Kelly.
He had his fantasies and he was trying to make them come to life. It just happened to be that it was our tent that he got into.
So after Terrence had stolen Cleo, he turned off his phone, then taken a dirt road back home to Carnarvon, which was only a mere 3 kilometers away from where Cleo lived with her parents. But he made a mistake because as he traveled back home, he turned his cell phone back on. And this was critical because had he never powered his phone back on, Cleo may never have been found. There had been a solitary ping to a mobile phone tower close to the campsite where Cleo's family had been staying. This ping occurred at 3:05 a.m. on October 16th, and that's eventually what led police to finding the 4-year-old. When Terrence Kelly went to trial, his defense team blamed not only his methamphetamine addiction for what he had done, but they also blamed his terrible upbringing. Apparently, at only 2 years old, Terrence had been abandoned by his alcoholic, drug-addict parents, and he was sent instead to live with his aunt. Prior to this, he had been given alcohol inside his baby bottles. By only 12 years old, Terrence had been hospitalized for wanting to take himself out of this world. He was additionally diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, and possible fetal alcohol syndrome. He also had significant borderline and narcissistic traits.
Kelly admitted he was high on meth at the time, living in an idealised fantasy world to escape his traumatic past that included a tangled web of social media profiles for a family that didn't exist.
You know, he wanted a daughter, he wanted a wife.
In October of 2021, 37-year-old Terrence Kelly ended up pleading guilty to his crime. He was then sentenced to 13 years and 6 months in prison. And he will not be eligible for parole until he's served at least 7 of those years.
It began as a massive, wide spectrum of investigation and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed, and just prior to his arrest, they became more focused on him.
But the nightmare still isn't over. Just this week, Terrence Kelly began challenging his sentence, his legal team lodging documents in the Court of Appeal, arguing proper weight wasn't given to his disadvantaged childhood.
In a victim impact statement, Cleo's parents said that their lives had been torn apart by what Terrence had done. Her mother, Ellie Smith, said, "As a parent, you want to make sure that they stay as a child for as long as they can. She lost that. That was taken from her." The first week after little Cleo arrived back at her house, she was so scared that she had to sleep with all the lights on and all the doors in the house wide open. Even then, she would often wake up in the middle of the night screaming from nightmares. And even months after, Cleo still told her mom and dad that she had very many sad nights. The Smiths have since moved away from their hometown of Carnarvon so that they can try to not constantly focus on what had happened there. Cleo, who is now 8 years old, is a happy little girl, and she loves horseback riding, school, and ballet. Well, thank you for listening to Cleo's story today. This is such an unusual case, with such a happy ending for once. Cleo's parents must have been so ready to give up hope after their little girl had been missing for an entire 18 days. And it is amazing and unbelievable that they were able to find her completely unharmed. So if you do like true crime and you want to hear it from me, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button below. And turn on your notifications too, so you'll know when I upload a new video, which is at least once every week. Thanks for watching A Wicked World today. Until next time, take care guys. Bye. Thank you to all the patrons of A Wicked World. Now, there's even more of A Wicked World on Patreon. So check it out at patreon.com/awickedworld or use the Patreon app. You'll have access to exclusive videos each month and more. Any support truly helps to make sure the victims never get forgotten and to highlight the shortcomings of society associated with each case. Also, if you haven't yet, go check out my new channel, Wicked Ways. Do you have a suggestion for a case you'd like to see me cover? If so, send me an email at awickedworldtruecrime@gmail.com.